Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Phil and this is the Blue Envelope channel. Today we're going to continue discussing Kingdom Farm. This is part 2 of the series. And Kingdom Farm is really interesting because both from a historical perspective to find out about what was at one time a major branch facility of Jehovah's Witnesses, and the memory of it is fading out a little bit as people get older. But secondly, looking at the life cycle of this particular branch really gives us a lot of insight in the current construction projects of Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly in Warwick and Ramapo, New York. So this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, definitely check that out. It talks about the creation and early years of Kingdom Farm. But very briefly to recap, it was an actual farm, a working farm that the society bought in 1935 in Lansing, New York, just outside of Ithaca in the Finger Lakes region. And it was used as sort of a communal living farm. It was staffed by Bethelites. And its main purpose at that point was to provide food for the headquarters staff, Bethelites, that were working in New York City. And that brings us up to where we start today in the mid-1930s. Now, you might recall that under Adolf Hitler in Germany, the Nazi salute, called the Sieg Heil, had become mandatory for all Germans by around 1934. And as you might think, this posed a serious problem for German Jehovah's Witnesses. Witnesses generally adhered to a policy of neutrality toward politics, and had actually already been banned in Germany. Now, what you may not realize is that at that time in the United States, an almost identical gesture to the Sieg Heil was used for the American flag salute as well. It was known as the Bellamy salute. What we now think of as the flag salute, that familiar hand over heart gesture, was actually not introduced until 1942. So Watchtower Society President Joseph Rutherford had been thinking about these salutes. The result was that during the 1935 Summer Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses, he introduced a new doctrine to the organization. Witnesses everywhere should not be saluting any man or flag.
It is Jehovah your God you must worship, and it is to him alone you must render sacred service. If we participate in a nationalistic ceremony, we're sharing in worship of something or someone other than Jehovah God. But in every case, Christians in some way make it evident that they are respectful observers, not participants.
Witnesses quickly adopted this new policy, and very soon this caused issues with witness school children in America who stopped saluting the flag in their classrooms, and school districts across the country began expelling witness children from school. The Watchtower Society in turn challenged these expulsions in court, and the issue eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court. On June 3, 1940, the court issued its ruling. Jehovah's Witnesses lost the case in an 8-1 decision. That ruling would stand for about 3 years until its reversal in 1943, which the Supreme Court issued, probably not coincidentally, on June 14th, Flag Day. Well, that 1940 ruling immediately unleashed a wave of vicious persecution and mob violence against Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States, to the point that 2 weeks later, on June 16th, U.S. Solicitor General Francis Biddle condemned the violence against the witnesses in a national radio broadcast. As he pointed out, "We shall not defeat the Nazi evil by emulating its methods." On June 21st, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt used her daily newspaper column titled My Day to censure the mob action. She wrote, "Must we drag people out of their homes to force them to do something which is in opposition to their religion?" The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, recorded that in 1940 alone there was more than 335 instances of mob violence in 44 states against 1,488 witnesses. Well, this ruling came less than 2 weeks before Flag Day in 1940 on June 14th. A Lansing, New York resident who was visiting a local tavern on June 13th overheard plans to the effect that the American Legion was coordinating a mob to burn down Kingdom Farm buildings the following day. The man notified John Bogard, the society's farm servant or superintendent at that time. He in turn notified the Tompkins County Sheriff, who, as it turned out, had already heard of the plans. The sheriff quickly made his own plans. On Flag Day, state police and county deputy sheriffs were deployed all along the Kingdom Farm property. That evening, 30 to 40 carloads of men converged on the property to burn it down, but police kept them moving along. Ultimately, the mob dispersed sometime after midnight without any violence occurring. In fact, 2 of the men in the mob later themselves converted to Jehovah's Witnesses.
Christian neutrality brought increased mob actions against Jehovah's Witnesses. On June 14, 1940, Flag Day, a group of men approached Kingdom Farm. David Abule recalls,
"We were put wise by an old fellow who had passed by on his way to buy his whiskey, to a plan by the townspeople to burn down all our buildings and wreck our machinery."
John Bogard remembers what happened next.
About 6 o'clock in the evening, the gang started to gather, one car after another, until there were 30 or 40 carloads. But the presence of the police kept them on the highway.
The witnesses were determined to stay on the property and wait it out. Late in the night, a frustrated mob finally disbanded.
During this tense period in the summer of 1940, Jehovah's Witnesses began constructing a large new building on Kingdom Farm property. It was a sturdy 3-story cement and steel building with a brick face, 30,000 square feet, not including the basement. Rumors circulated wildly in Lansing about the building's purpose. Some said it was for war purposes, for storing ammunition and guns. Well, the mystery was revealed on June 1st, 1941. On that date, Jehovah's Witnesses held an open house for area residents to inspect the brand new building. President Rutherford, noted to be the prime mover for the improvement of the place, gave a talk to visitors explaining the building's true purpose. Visitors that day included Cornell professors and their wives, local merchants and physicians, and the Tompkins County Sheriff. The open house showed that the new building was designed to house a large number of people. The building's basement contained the utilities, laundry facilities, and an infirmary. The first floor included a large cafeteria, a kitchen, a sewing room, and offices. It also included space for a general store, where will be kept a supply of general merchandise to be used by farmers or others round about who might need something in this line. The upper 2 floors consisted of dormitories and bathrooms. Why did Rutherford want this building constructed? Who did he think would be moving in? As a 1950 issue of the Watchtower indicates, it was erected for emergency purposes. In his 1941 dedication talk, Rutherford expounded on the emergency he saw looming as war raged around the globe. At my instance, our friends in London purchased 2 farms about 40 miles out from the city, and these farms have been operated since to raise food to feed many who need help, and buildings have been erected on them as a place of refuge, and many have been served there. In Switzerland also our friends acquired 2 farms, which have served as a refuge for many who have fled from Austria and Czechoslovakia, and a few that have escaped from the terrible conditions in Germany. We have acquired property in Germany and built that up for the aid of the people, and also in Czechoslovakia and Poland, but the Nazis have made it impossible for anyone who serves Almighty God to use these properties. In Australia and in other places, Jehovah's Witnesses have likewise taken a similar course. A few years ago, this farm where we now are was offered for sale. It was purchased. At the time, several buildings for dwelling purposes were already here, and seeing from the Scriptures what is coming, and knowing that great trouble is due to America as well as other countries, consecrated men and women believed it to be entirely proper that we should here attempt to do something to take care of those who are unable to take care of themselves. So, a little less than a year ago, we set about to erect this present structure. We expect this building to render good to many, and it may be that some of you, as our neighbors, will find it necessary to come some time for help, and we shall be glad to extend it to you in any way we can. So Rutherford rightly expected that the war would inevitably result in refugees. He envisioned that this new Kingdom Farm building could house some of these, even as the Watchtower Society had set up similar combination refugee centers and farms in England, Switzerland, and Australia. If human civilization began to break down, these centers would be self-sufficient oases in the chaos. But there was also a more pragmatic reason for the new building. Multiple branch offices of Jehovah's Witnesses had been forcibly closed down around the world. Rutherford feared the same would happen to the world headquarters in Brooklyn. The new building in Lansing would serve as a backup headquarters, so staff could continue directing the organization from Kingdom Farm if necessary. In an intriguing way, the building's name confirms its primary purpose as an emergency headquarters. Rutherford named the new building Gilead. The name can still be seen on the structure today, prominently carved into the stone entranceway. Today we may know Gilead as the name of the totalitarian theonomic government which takes over the United States in Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. But why did Rutherford pick this name? Awake magazine explains it was taken from Genesis 31 verses 48 and 49. This Bible account describes a pile or heap of stones jointly erected by Jacob and Laban as a symbol of their covenant together. The 1984 edition of the New World Translation reads, "And Laban proceeded to say, 'This heap is a witness between me and you today.' That is why he called its name Gilead and the Watchtower, because he said, 'Let Jehovah keep watch between me and you when we are situated unseen the one from the other.'" Verse 48 uses the name Gilead, which Jehovah's Witnesses understand to be the source of the more common Bible word Gilead, seen earlier in Genesis 31. Notably, the verses indicate that the stone monument erected by Jacob and Laban had twin names, Gilead and the Watchtower. They were two names to describe the same thing. Hence, when Rutherford had Gilead carved on the building's stone entrance, it was in essence an ingenious secret code. To most outsiders, the word would simply be an obscure Bible term. But to those in the know, the word Gilead would be a coded message signaling whose building it actually was, the Watchtower Society's. At the time of his talk in Lansing, Rutherford was dying of colon cancer. He died on January 8, 1942. In those final months, Rutherford's personal theology, which in turn became official Watchtower Society theology, was demonstrably that, just as his own life was drawing to a close, the world's end was also drawing near. The September 15, 1941 issue of the Watchtower reviewed Rutherford's talk he had given at the August Convention in St. Louis, Missouri. During this talk, Rutherford announced the publication of his latest book, Children. Describing how the children at the convention felt when they received a free copy of the book, which had been personally autographed by Rutherford, the article says that, receiving the gift, the marching children clasped it to them, not a toy or plaything for idle pleasure, but the Lord's provided instrument for most effective work in the remaining months before Armageddon. What a gift, and to so many. Yes, Rutherford was measuring the time left before Armageddon, not in years, but months. He told his 1941 listeners at Kingdom Farm that, although the current world war would end, that would only herald the onset of Armageddon, God's final war. The war that is now afflicting Europe and other countries will go on for a time. Some kind of peace will be patched up soon. Then those who have to do with bringing about that so-called peace will boastingly say, "We have brought about peace and safety." The worst trouble will then follow. Those who have attempted to rule and are now attempting to rule in the place of God's kingdom will suffer destruction. This will be at the battle of that great day of God Almighty, described in the Scriptures, and otherwise known as the Battle of Armageddon, and of which Jesus speaks as a time of trouble such as the world has never known, and that will be the last. No one will survive that trouble, except those who take their stand on the side of God and his kingdom. Although Rutherford fully expected Armageddon in the coming months, investing the time and resources to construct the Gilead Center was, in his mind, well worth it. This was because even if it had been completed only days before the world's end, it could be used by Jehovah's Witnesses after Armageddon as well. He said, Jehovah's Witnesses expect to use this house and these farms for the purpose of aiding and giving comfort to those persons who humbly seek the Lord and who strive to do his will and serve him. In Rutherford's mind, Kingdom Farm would serve as a nucleus of a new world.
And beneath a man, we find his nucleus.
Nucleus?
A base from which a fresh, righteous human society could spread. Rutherford gave his standard prophecy to the county sheriff and the Cornell professors listening. Soon after Armageddon, Bible characters would be resurrected and striding the halls of Kingdom Farm buildings. You may expect soon to see standing in this very place where I now stand some of these faithful men, either Daniel or Abraham, Barak, or some of those other faithful men. And then you will note that the kingdom is taking on a visible, active form for the good of those who serve Jehovah. Rutherford died the following winter, but the world continued on. Armageddon did not come, and no Bible characters were resurrected to live in upstate New York. The building known as Gilead was never used for refugees or as a backup headquarters. Its general store never opened for business. John Booth, who later became the overseer of Kingdom Farm, and later still a governing body member, recalled that in 1941, just he and 2 others were assigned to live in the 30,000 square foot building. It remained all but vacant, a boondoggle, a poignant symbol of unfulfilled predictions given by Watchtower leaders to rank-and-file witnesses.
She said I won't be back in a while, don't wait. Already packed her bags, called a cab, made space. And she said I won't answer if you call me when you're lonely. I guess I let her go, never mind, it's too late.